Hello and welcome to episode 78 of the Foundry Roundtable, the podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm your tame Foundry author, Drogan1701. With me is a man who is 47% pink slime, Greendragoon.
Big bags of mostly water.
And the man who was making entire tracks of static before Taylor Swift made it cool, Markhawkman.
Well, technically that's only converted from a different file format.
And our guest tonight, welcome back to the show, Relum Time. Crickets. Did we lose Relum?
I think so, because he dropped out of game too.
Okay. Appears he has suffered a disconnect, so we'll get him back into the call as soon as we can.
In the meantime, we'll replace him with this lifelike Relum statue.
Yes. It's much more... okay, he says his computer overheated, and we'll be back in a few. Ooh. So, as soon as he gets back, we will move on with the show. But actually, this gives us a good opportunity to do something we were planning to do tonight. So, Dragoon, in honor of Delta Rising, why don't you run the awesome intro?
It's been 32 years since Voyager finished its journey.
We thought we had left the Delta Quadrant behind us.
We were wrong.
The gateways to the quadrant are open.
And the choices we made have long-lasting effects. Now, we will help the friends we left behind.
And fight the rising darkness.
Voyager's first trip through the Delta Quadrant was a solitary one.
We must return to set things right.
This time, we must unite to survive.
Absolutely. Big fan of that trailer, and it's awesome to see the crew in there again, and it just really brings back Voyager. I mean,
yeah.
It brings it back from the dead. It also like a Kobali.
It also does a nice bit of ominous foreshadowing.
Yeah. Lots of ominous foreshadowing, and as somebody pointed
not
out,
necessarily ominous.
Possibly ominous. Ominous in a few cases, I would say. As somebody pointed out on like Twitter or the forums or Reddit sometime today, I can't remember where it was. There were a few things that were shown in the trailer that we haven't seen in game just yet.
Well,
the Caretaker's Array.
I don't think that was the Caretaker's Array. I think that was one of the Hirogen arrays.
Well, still though. Have we seen an array that looks like that in a mission yet?
Yeah, the one patrol.
I think it was... It looked almost more like... well, we've seen the array, but there were some interiors that looked like Elachi interiors that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, somebody identified one of the shots as an Elachi station.
Mm-hmm. But we do know that they haven't released just everything just yet, so... there's going to be some more featured episodes. I don't know before the end of the year or if they'll be in 2015, but there's going to be some more Delta Quadrant stuff for sure.
Well, I mean, the devs have said that they've kind of got a full schedule planned out all the way up to the anniversary.
Oh yeah,
in February.
But I for one can't wait to see what else they are coming. up with. But we do have some news, actually lots of news, including some Foundry news. So the first couple little items to dispense with, I have to apologize for the lack of a show last week. It was a scheduling error that was entirely my fault. When it came around to Wednesday, I said, hey, let's wait and do a show Friday, give ourselves some time to really experience more Delta Rising so we can get some good, more informed reviews there. And then the time we determined for Saturday, I failed to actually look at all the things I had to do Saturday, and so we couldn't do it then. But here we are. We're back to our regularly scheduled program.
I'm pretty sure I'm contractually obligated to take the blame for everything.
Okay, so it's Dragoon's fault.
There we go. The world is right again.
Yes. As a side note, be sure to add Relum whenever he gets back. But in other very good news that we got while we were off the air, Mr. 50,000 Plays himself, Rogue Enterprise, has gotten engaged.
Woo!
Yeah. I had the pleasure of meeting Rogue and the future Mrs. Enterprise at Star Trek Las Vegas, and really you could not hope to meet two nicer people, and I'm sure you guys join me in saying congratulations.
Congrats, Rogue.
Congrats.
And of course, on to Foundry news. I will have to say that it's been kind of a confusing downtime. First, before Delta Rising dropped, there was no actual post to indicate that we were getting downtime. We found out later that there had been some more internet outages at the PWE headquarters in San Francisco, which delayed some of the devlogs for sure. So maybe we can put that the lack of a post up to the outages. In any case, we do actually have some downtime, as you all know. Started last Tuesday. On Friday, the spotlights came up, and then Captain Smirk came on the forums and made a post saying the rest of the missions and the editor would be coming up that day, and he had some sort of mini competition for us. However, no more missions came up that day, and the editor remained offline, and is still offline. Which kind of left a lot of us scratching our heads. So I don't really know why he made that post or why it turned out to not be accurate. So I'll just say that this is why you don't post timelines.
No, I mean, we didn't actually see anything other than the spotlight show up until the following Monday. And then since then, it looks like everything has slowly come back.
Yeah. And Odyssey 47 is saying that forum post has been deleted. So
Well,
obviously something happened to make that not accurate. So who knows?
Yeah. I do know.
And Smirk's been kind of MIA since then. It's very strange.
I don't know. I mean, he's still around somewhere. I know Trendy was.
I've seen him making some posts on the forums, but he hasn't been on Twitter.
He's probably really
Not that he
busy.
has to be.
But he did make a few hints, and it seems like this proposed Foundry challenge would be shortened, like short development challenge, and I think he was thinking would be Halloween themed or some
Halloween
kind of
themed. Obviously, we would have less than 2 weeks to get a mission done, which can be done for sure.
Yeah. I could
So
have done it in 5 hours.
yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know with the editor not coming back whether it's going to be feasible
whether
or
they're still
not.
going to do that. Yeah, I don't know. We will have to wait and see, because where we're at right now is that it seems like most of the missions have been republished, but Primar's saying that Smirk is on vacation for the week. That's cool. Everybody needs a vacation.
I'm sure after the Delta Rising launch, he needs one.
Yeah. But in any case, we did learn something interesting. When the editor comes back up, there's going to be some more additions to the Foundry than what we had seen on Tribble. Specifically, we're going to get some new NPCs to play with. We have females and males in EV suits. That will be very useful because NPCs, as we know, are not killed by the space volume.
Well, even more so
At
than
least
this,
or at least that's what I've been told. I have not tested it.
they do not. They're not like normal NPC groups where they've got like you can really do anything to them. But I think what Zero is doing is this is a workaround for the environmental suit costume. She couldn't get into the costume editor.
Yeah.
Since
It
those are-
seems like the better way to me almost.
yeah.
Well,
'Cause I mean,
because player characters don't actually have the ability to make costumes that are EV suits at all. We put on an EV suit, and the game automatically uses the other character model instead of our character model.
well, I mean, it's kind of a swap out, costume swap out. But
Yeah.
part of the problem is that as from what I've observed, is that the specifically like the helmet is actually part of the chest piece, and then it has to interact with the head just right to make sure the head is removed. And so there's a lot of little tricky stuff that would be kind of confusing for our costume editor, which is a little bit less restrictive than the in-game costume editor.
I'll say though that it would be nice someday to be able to have like one in the costume editor that you could still see the NPC's face through, like you can do with Detan and some of them.
Yeah,
That
but
is
I mean,
kind of
That would be neat.
interesting.
That would be neat to have.
I do seem to remember someone mentioning that was one of those hacktastic tricks along the lines of making someone look like a Klingon while they play a mission.
yeah, I mean, you get run into all sorts of problems with getting the head sticking through the the helmet. So it's an incredibly tricky thing to pull off.
Mm-hmm. And we know that sometimes Cryptic does to get things to work. Okay, go ahead and add Relin back to the call.
I've been here. You guys have been talking, so
Oh, fantastic!
I've been quiet.
He's back.
That's so good. I already added him.
We're getting into winter here. Your computer shouldn't be overheating, right?
Okay, my computer's dying, so it overheats regardless.
You can blow that
Well,
thing out.
mine has to use an external fan to avoid overheating, so I know how that feels.
Yeah, that's what I did. Is I plugged in a giant fan and have it blowing on it now. Like, no,
There-
don't overheat. Don't overheat.
Seriously,
Fingers
pick,
crossed.
Pick up a can of compressed air and go blow it out when you get a chance.
Oh, I have an air compressor. I did that last week. Oh,
Somebody has visitors at the door apparently.
that's me.
Just hope it doesn't end up like that World of Warcraft live stream I heard about, where one of the live streamers was actually arrested during a broadcast.
Yeah. But
While
think of
that
the ratings.
sounds amusing, that doesn't seem like the sort of the thing that would be good for the show as long.
No, I'd rather not have that happen.
I don't know. Realm's not a regular. He's expendable.
No, he's a red shirt. So let's see. We're also getting a few other new NPCs. These, namely holograms. We get the tutorial EMH, prison warden, holographic Orion female, Klingon male, and a Mako female. Very cool. I assume they will have the flicker effect.
I'm very excited about the tutorial EMH since I just recently
Yeah,
used
since
that character.
you built one, and now you can have one that flickers like a hologram.
Yay!
All right. So as soon as the Foundry editor comes back on, that's what we'll have, along with all of the Delta Rising stuff. And I'm kind of hoping that we'll have the Intel ships in there as well. I've got a mission or two where I could slot in some Intel ships that would be very thematically appropriate, I think.
And a super huge thanks to Zeronius Rex, who's been working to get all this stuff in.
Oh
for
yeah,
us.
absolutely. I'm gonna say it's so much fun interacting with her on Twitter now too, as well. So let's see. Let's move on to the big thing that's been going on for all of us. That would be Delta Rising. So so far, how far are you guys into the expansion?
I've only actually played 2 of the story missions so far, and then there's that one thing where I did something out of order where I talked to Comptons in their little convoy.
Yeah, that's one of the part of the patrol at just after. I think it's after the second story mission.
Friends in unlikely places.
Yeah. Which, of course, you can do those in any order, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all of the patrols are doable outside of their wrapper missions. I think they're kind of meant to be kind of filler content that you can repeat whenever you want, or do it for the marks.
They're supposed to be exactly that.
Well, it's kind of like how you go to Sirius Sector Block and you have the various patrols in the Sirius Sector Block.
Yeah.
Actually, didn't those used to have some sort of slotting in the story or something?
Well, you used to get wrapper missions for them from Sulu. And he would have you run around the various systems on a patrol.
Yeah, they got rid of the wrapper. I think you can still play some of the patrols, though, can't you?
I think so. I think you can only play them once. I think after you've done them once, the door disappears.
I'll tell you this, though. I wish there was something that they had brought back from those original patrols, which was the open teaming thing.
Yeah, it would have been kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was always interesting. Is you warp into the system, and you never know how many other people are going to be doing the mission when you get there.
So you might be by yourself. You might be in a team of 3. You might be in a team of 2. Who knows? I always quite liked that.
And of course, space mobs do hilarious things when you have large teams.
Oh, yes.
That's one of those funny things. I'm just never entirely sure exactly how popular that was. I think a number of people turned it off.
Well, I mean, I can only say that I liked it. I can't speak for anybody else.
I enjoyed it.
And I certainly haven't done it for a long time, because, of course, nobody does those anymore.
I would say if I was already teamed with someone, I didn't like it, but if I was solo, it was kind of fun.
So, let's see. Dragoon, how far are you into?
I just got up to 55. So I'm on the Kabali Prime, and then I'm a few story missions after that. See, I met Neelix and Tuvok and Kim and the Doctor.
Yeah, I say by that point you've met everybody. Or, all the canon characters. Relum, how far are you in Delta Rising?
I'm only a little 54. I just made it to the patrol mission right after the Kabali Prime battle zone area. I kind of ruined the whole story concept there during beta. I mean, during Dribble. So I've not been as interested as I wanted to be.
That's why I purposefully played only a few of the missions on Dribble. And of course, they did not put the final mission in the series on Dribble for people to see. So, and it's worth it to see that mission.
Yeah. Well, with my computer,
no spoilers, but it's crazy. Because I've played all of the missions at this point. I have not played all of the patrols, but all the story missions I have.
So I think seeing it.
I've heard, but not tested yet, that patrols don't always play out the same way every time you run them.
There is some elements of randomness. So you take, one of the very earliest ones is the Argala patrol. It's the one that lots of people farm at this point for XP. But you can get several different kinds of enemies in there. I've seen Kazon and Hirogen. Actually, I think one time I even saw them both in the same mission. So I don't know how much the other patrols are randomized. I know there's some different formats to the patrols that are interesting. There's one that's like a time trial race in a shuttle. which I thought was a lot of fun, and I think should be blown up into like a PvE match, so you could have an actual race.
That would be cool.
That reminds me of a specific episode of Voyager.
I think it's supposed to.
I think
get out your drive uniform.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect it too soon. I think the devs right now are still dealing with all the various fires and whatnot from Delta Rising's launch. But
yeah, there will be lots of fixes.
Yeah, that one annoying glitch with how certain patrols wouldn't scale properly. Oh well.
And there's teaming glitches and all kinds of other stuff, as there always is. But and this is something that Primer in the chat room was saying not too long ago, that I completely agree with, is that it seems like it's been a system-wise a very smooth launch.
Yeah, relatively.
Yeah.
There's only one really particularly annoying glitch I've seen so far, and that's the one that makes it so that Klingon allied Romulans can't do normal training.
Yeah.
For the bridge officers. But other than that,
Which I think I saw a dev post today that says they got a fix in for that. I don't know if it'll go live with tomorrow's patch or not, but they do have one ready for that. Let's see. The major bugs I've heard of is that there's people have been saying that there's some crashes to desktop, of course, that happen here and there on people's load screens. Not something that I've experienced. And then there's one where it keeps resetting people's power trays in space, I think. I think Hippie John has experienced that one.
Yeah, I've been seeing that one as well. It is
but not 100% sure that's a new glitch or simply a new appearance of an old glitch.
I'm pretty sure it didn't do this before Delta Rising.
I don't remember seeing it, other than the one where it unslots your bridge officers for no reason at all.
Yeah, this is different than that.
I keep getting that one. Or I should say I kept getting that one, but I haven't seen it since Delta Rising, and I've been playing a lot, so.
I'm sure they'll get up for
10 Volunteer 70 in the chat room says that he's gotten a crash several times over the past week. Hopefully that gets smoothed out. But I mean, I haven't really gotten any disconnects, and it's really been pretty good as far as my experience goes. Very smooth, actually not really much lag at all either.
Yeah, I haven't seen any queues or whatnot to get into the servers.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think they've learned a few lessons from Legacy Romulus.
Legacy Romulus.
So let's see. Let's talk about the story missions. What do you guys think of those so far?
I'm enjoying them very much. I'm not quite as far as you, but there's a couple of missions I've seen where they're really trying to play with things like morality and kind of really trying to get you to question ethics and whatnot, which is something very refreshing to see in Star Trek Online and very reminiscent of the shows.
I know there was a huge debate going on just a few minutes ago in the Starbase UGC chat room about the Kobali and just, kind of that race in general. Hippie John really hates them.
Well, they were a morally gray. They were an uncomfortable species even in Voyager.
Yeah.
Because nobody liked the idea of resurrecting the dead.
I actually just watched that episode the other night. It's a good episode, and it's a very interesting one, I thought.
But yeah, I mean, without spoiling anything, this kind of ratchets it up to another level.
Mm-hmm. And you find some things about the Kobali. I like that. First of all, I like that we have a lot of allies in the Delta Quadrant, like the Kobali. But you find out some things that maybe they're not. Things aren't black and white about them. There's some gray area, and I very much like that. I think Star Trek is at its best when it's exploring gray areas.
Also, some of our allies in the Delta Quadrant don't exactly like us. They're willing to cooperate with us to a certain extent, but they don't really like us.
Absolutely.
And of course, you kind of get into situations where you have to question whether the morally right decision is really the best decision.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you have that debate, I think, at least a little bit.
I haven't gotten through all of the Kobali missions because the Kobali zone has unlocking missions along with
they unlock as you level, and I think the last one you get is around 57 or something like that.
But yeah, it's one of those things that I haven't gone through all of those yet, so I don't know yet how things kind of wrap up with that or how they progress.
Mm-hmm. Well, Hippie's saying in the chat room that he says the fact that he hates them is good because he actually cares enough to not like a race, and it's good. It's evoking that kind of reaction. I mean, that's what you want when you're making something like this. Because if people don't care, then what's the point?
Yeah, but it's definitely. I mean, it kind of gives that feeling of we're not in Federation space. We don't have those high ideals that we can cling to out here. I mean,
we're in the
we
Wild
kind of
West here.
We have our own set of morality as the Federation, but at the same time, we're surrounded by people and working with people who don't necessarily aren't bound by those restrictions, and we kind of have to decide how much do we want to force our position on them. Which, of course, got Janeway into all sorts of trouble.
Oh, yeah. Over and over again. Not even just with the Kobali. I think the devs made some good choices with the races that they brought in, and allowed them to explore those races a bit more than you could do in one episode of Voyager. Like the Benthans, who were seen very briefly even in one episode, and it wasn't even about them at all. And then the hierarchy as well, they've been able to explore them a bit more, and the Kobali, of course, and the Borg Cooperative and all those guys,
which I mean, yeah, it's definitely kind of a cool thing to kind of see all the little threads that they pulled together. One race that we have not seen yet that I'm still really looking forward to seeing, and I don't think I'll see it in this batch, is the Krenim. Who here thinks they're saving them
there's
for
a few mentions made of them, and I won't say what or where they are, but there's a few mentions made of them that I found. And, I hope we see them as well, because I think they're a very cool race.
You think the fact that we have been getting mentions of them is a sign that the devs have something big planned for them?
It's possible. I mean, they did win that poll. And Cryptic, for those who don't believe this, Cryptic does have a track record of doing what those polls, going with the results of those polls.
My opinion, and this is just a theory.
Playable Romulans won the poll, and we got those. Voyager won the poll, and we're getting that, and Krenim won the poll. So I'm sure we'll see.
Saying our opinion actually matters? Wow.
Apparently, yes.
I get the feeling that what that poll was really about was which race would end up getting a featured episode series devoted towards them. Because as we've seen, they've pretty much went and used everyone from the list anyways.
It's true, they have. I mean, I think, Voth weren't on the list because they already were already working on stuff for the Voth, because they had the Dyson Sphere, of course. And I can't remember who else was on the poll, but the Kazon were, for sure.
Well, one race that was notably absent was the Vadwar, because, well, we know what the Vadwar were planned for by now.
Bazag says he'd be interested to see the Think Tank, which would be interesting. That was a good episode. had, of course, Jason Alexander from Seinfeld on it. I think the implication was that they were probably destroyed or captured at the end of that, but you know, I don't think they were supposed to have been killed.
Yeah, I don't think. I bet you 10 to 1 they got out of that situation.
And then he says the Vidians, and of course they, the think tank is supposed to have cured the phage, so who knows what's going on with the Vidians these days.
Well, Vidians are harder because the Vidians were like further off from the region of space we were in.
Well, and Pax brings up a good point in the chat room, is that his problem with Delta Rising is that they kind of shoehorned races and planets spanning tens of thousands of light years across Voyager's journey and crammed them into 2 or 3 sector blocks.
Yeah, it may just well have been
it's kind of just a conceit that you kind of have to do. And I like that they got a lot of races in. I think its variety is good.
Well, one thing that I thought of about the Vidians is that there were 2 main aspects of their race as seen in Voyager that are relevant from a game design perspective. One of them is that, like the Hirogen, they had become a nomadic race because, you know, sure, they had planets, they had colonies, but they kept going places, trying to find things to help their race continue to survive.
Sure.
So they'd become much more nomadic than they had been in the past. So there's no telling how far and wide their people spread as they were searching for a cure.
And there's no reason that we can't open up another sector block as well.
Yeah.
Even going further back on Voyager's journey.
Also, one thing to consider is that the simple fact that the think tank may or may not have created a cure for the phage does not necessarily mean that all of the Vidians have access to the cure.
Hey, there's your storyline right there. Something to do with the ones that don't have access.
No, I think Cryptic has set themselves up for tons and tons of potential storylines.
Oh yeah, I mean we could be in the Delta Quadrant for a year or more, or stuck there for 2 years, Dragoon. Anyway, let's so here's where it gets a little thorny for me, is the patrols. I think some of them are good. I think some of them are far too tedious with the, you know, kill 10 rats sort of structure. And I think, I don't know, because there's actually some good story content in them if you read everything. Especially because there's a great storyline between 2 races where you essentially take 2 races that were fighting each other, and over the course of a couple of patrols, you actually get to help them make peace. I thought that was very cool. So, I mean, I would tell everyone to play them at least once.
Yeah. I think the only thing where they kind of fall down is that in many cases it's just so many battles after battles. Because, I mean,
yeah.
You get like 5 or 6 different rounds these battles, and if this was a Foundry mission, I'd say you're dragging it out too much. You're trying to spread it out. I know why they did this. They did it so that people can't just breeze through and find whatever's the shortest patrol to get their 5 marks, so they can get the daily bonus for Delta marks or experience or whatever. But still, yeah, I mean, it does come off as very ugh.
and I think the XP requirements seem like it's trying to like artificially stretch it out.
Yeah.
It seems like, because I mean, if you were able to get through the patrols and get through the 1 story mission per level, and that would get you the whole level, I think that'd be great. But
you'd be done with it in like 10 hours.
On normal XP. Well, I'm kind of fine with that. I almost feel like they actually had about 5 levels worth of stuff instead of 10, and it would have been better if they had done 5.
Yeah, but for them, they have to get a certain return on investment. Basically, if they're going to spend all of this time making these 10 or 15 missions, they expect it to occupy players for a certain amount of time. So, yeah, the patrols and the higher than expected cost of leveling is all a byproduct of trying to get keep the players occupied so long, while they basically come up with more content.
Well, we did know that, going in, that they were going to slow down leveling, and that's fine, because I mean, even though I have, I'm an altholic, I have 25 alts, and I've been perfectly fine with how fast the leveling was. Objectively speaking, I felt like it was really too fast. But I feel like they've slowed it down too much. And it's such a fine line as well. I mean, I can't. I mean, it's a very subjective thing between too slow and slow enough, and too fast. And I really can't say where that line is. I just feel like it's too slow at the moment.
Well, me personally, I've actually gotten most of my leveling done by doing duty officer assignments and not from playing the missions. I mean, because the missions I played were enough to get me halfway to level 52. If I'd played all the story missions, I'm not entirely sure that if I just ground through the story missions, I would have actually gotten enough experience to get to level 53.
No, you definitely wouldn't have.
Yeah. I think, yeah.
Because the story missions themselves don't really reward much in the way of XP. Maybe like a third of a level at most. And so you're left after that with nothing to do except the patrols or PvE content, PvE queues.
I wouldn't mind of seeing more PvE queues available at those early levels, because when you first start out, all you have access to is Borg disconnected.
Yeah. I will say this, they seem to have removed the requirement that you played the story mission Dragon's Deceit before you can do Bug Hunt. Because I can do it on this character who has not done Dragon's Deceit, which is like a level 57 mission or something like that.
I can check, see this is only a 55.
See, if you look in your PvE queues, you should see it available. Yep. So, which is nice, because that gives you another option, a ground option. I think it's kind of a fun mission.
Yeah, I don't see it in here, so it must still be level locked.
Huh. What level are you?
55.
Well, see, I'm 54 and I see it. Maybe it's an account-wide. Oh, yeah, Primar says it's an account-wide thing.
Oh, see, that makes sense.
Once you've played Dragon's Deceit once, you can do Bug Hunt on any character. That makes more sense now. So I don't know. Overall thoughts so far?
I like it. Yeah, it can be a little slow, and feel that to kind of drag on a few points, especially around the patrols and trying to come up with ways to level in the interim when you run out of missions. I really wish the open missions and whatnot in the Kobali zone gave more, because they really do not give enough to make it worthwhile.
Yeah.
I always end up going to other better sources, usually elite patrols, to get enough experience.
They don't seem to award a lot of marks either.
No, I mean, even if you really compete in an open mission, I think the most you can get is 5.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm hoping that when you get to the end that things pick up and they offer more bigger targets.
Well, one question that sprang to my mind is whether or not you get the daily bonus marks box for doing one of the patrols.
You do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is nice because then it actually kind of allows you to get a head start on the Delta mark or Delta reputation versus waiting to get up to 60 before really participating in the rep system.
Well, actually, I've gotten most of my Delta marks from doing Borg Disconnected. But, yeah.
But yeah, you get if you have not gotten the bonus, you get the bonus from the patrols, which is really nice. My only complaint is like all the gear that comes out of the reputation projects requires those advanced power cells, or those ancient power cells. And you can't get any of those unless you're on advanced, and advanced are really hard right now.
Well, I'll tell you this: when you get up to around, I don't know, like 57ish, and you've got some Mark 13 gear, you can really start doing bug hunt advanced, which is far easier than attempting to do disconnected advanced.
So it may just be a case that
so that's where I've been getting mine from. And I've got
that
a couple
things
of
just
pieces
might
of gear
still need a
already.
little bit of balancing. I know they
Yeah,
were
and
talking,
there's going to be some balancing in tomorrow's patch. Normal and advanced mobs, their hit points are being reduced, and then the hit points of elite mobs are actually being increased.
Yeah, one observation I've made about doing STFs, particularly the Borg STFs, is that the HP of the Borg enemies in the current normal seemed a lot more like the HP that you would normally see them having in the old Elite.
Yeah. And I think that's part of what makes the patrols a little tedious, is that the mobs have had so much more hit points than usual.
Yeah, I made the observation when I was assisting the Ocampan Freighter Patrol that the Hirogen ships that I was fighting, and there were several of them. I think I blew up a total of 4 Hirogen ships. Some of them, not necessarily all of them, some of them had 65,000 hit points, which isn't, a huge amount, but this isn't the battleship mob. This is, like the mid-rank mobs.
Well, I think they definitely have some tweaking to do, and we'll have to wait and see what everything feels like after tomorrow's patch.
I don't know, it could be that the the scaling up from 50 to 60 is a little wonky. So that maybe once we all get up
that's
to
part of it.
once we get up to 60, things will seem more balanced. But down in the lower 50s, things aren't balancing out right.
Yeah. Well, and this is kind of a new thing for them. I mean, their intention is to make things a lot more challenging, and it's going to take some tweaking before they get it right. I mean, how many times have we heard over the past couple of years about how easy Stowe is? People taking tier 1 Constitution classes into infected elite and winning it easily. So,
well,
I think they heard that, and they didn't want that anymore.
I am one of those people who, me and 4 other people from the Star Trek Battles channel, we got together, took a group of Tier 1 and Tier 2 ships. Granted, we outfitted them with top-of-the-line gear, but we used Tier 1 and Tier 2 ships to do a star-based defense. And we got the optional using Tier 1 and Tier 2 ships. I personally only went and splatted once, and that was because a lag spike caused me to miss a heal. And that was me flying the Tier 1 Tavaro.
Yeah, and I think people were posting a lot of those things everywhere on the forums and on Reddit and stuff like that. And I think Cryptic saw that, and they were like, "Yeah, obviously this is too easy for everybody now."
Yeah, I think the problems we run into though is that we have such a wide berth of player skill.
Sure. As a counterpoint to that being too easy, I mean, we were talking about a team of 5 players who are, let's just say we're pretty good at it. And
Yeah, you're experienced. You know, you've got good ship builds. You've got good equipment. You know what you're doing.
Mhm. And Starbase Defense is not meant to be an uber challenging mission. If you look at it in the queue, it has one tick mark for the challenge level.
Well, I mean, I remember a time when even doing STFs on normal was hard for me.
Oh yeah.
So.
Well, the thing here though is that one of their things they kind of sort of messed up when they were doing their difficulty scaling changes is apparently they kind of did something like doubling or tripling the HP of all the enemies in Starbase Defense, which apparently it didn't work out the way they were hoping it would.
So, well, it'll definitely be interesting to see where everybody's at come tomorrow.
So something else about the patrol scaling. I think people should check their own missions because I have a feeling that any wonkiness in the scaling is also going to affect Foundry missions for people playing between 50 and 60. I did a test run of Part 1, and it did seem like the enemies were harder than I remember.
Yeah, that's something I've not done yet, so we'll definitely have to try that out. And of course, we are getting some new combat mobs with Delta Rising as soon as the Foundry editor comes back up. Obviously, Vaudouar, which of course are by design the hardest mobs in the game.
It's a funny thing. I don't think they're harder than like any other particular mob. I think what makes them hard is they have some unusual tactics that are specifically designed to trip up the player.
Yeah, I definitely had to develop some new tactics when I was fighting those guys.
Because they'll do a lot of things where
and also they use a few skills that you don't normally see AIs using at all.
Something I noticed when I was playing on Kobali Prime is the Vaudouar would circle around. There would always be one guy that would circle around behind me and try to flank me.
Oh yeah.
Which is not something I never saw any other NPC group do.
Except the Alachi.
But I made something that made them much more difficult because I had to suddenly deal with that flanking damage or try and take out the guy that would circle behind.
With the Alachi, the guy who tries to flank you is their engineer that drops turrets. What they'll do is they'll drop a Crescent Bolt turret and the Stasis turret in front of you. Then while you're preoccupied with those, they'll try to go around behind you and toss another one behind you. Granted, I usually shoot them before they get a chance to do it, but it's what they attempt to do.
Yeah, it's definitely something that it kind of requires you to think differently.
Mm-hmm. I think they've upped their game a little bit on the AI and the AI's use of skills and tactics and positioning.
It's kind of nice to... I know everyone likes to complain about Cryptic making things more difficult by upping NPC's HP. And this seems like a different attempt to create difficulty.
Mm-hmm. But as I keep saying, I mean, who knows what's going to happen tomorrow? They might have nerfed things too much, and everything will be too easy now.
Everything will break. The world will come to an end.
Yes, as Casmodian likes to say,
Doom.
So I guess we'll find out. I don't know. Okay, so overall rating thus far, I would say I would rate it, I don't know, like an 8.
Yeah.
There's some things I don't like about the expansion, whereas in Legacy Ramos I liked pretty much everything. So I mean, comparing it to the other expansion, I rated just a bit less than that one. But I like a lot of stuff.
If it was a Foundry mission, 4 stars?
4 stars. Where I'd say Legacy Ramos was a 5.
My favorite thing is some of the tricks they tossed into some of the episodes, because one thing I noticed with the one where you're going around inside the Talaxian asteroid base is they do this trick where they have you going into a turbo lift, and they don't actually move you very far in the map, so you can continue to use the same map that you were using at the beginning of the mission. You just walk into the turbo lift, it does its thing, and then you walk out the other side. I think all it does is like move you up 6 meters or down or something like that. That was something really cool, because a lot of the cryptic missions where they did stuff like that, they would build the second part of the map like way off to the side. With this one, you could actually see where you started out if you went and looked out a window.
Are you talking about the base?
Which was nice. Yeah, the one where you help the Talaxians in their little asteroid base. I think it's like the second mission.
Yeah, it's the second mission.
Yeah, another really cool map trick that he did was the one in Mindscape where you're walking around inside Voyager and the hallways change every time you trigger a mission objective. That was awesome.
Yeah, and that's just a couple of key choice map wall changes, which is really cool. I mean, and it certainly isn't something that we couldn't do as Foundry authors.
Well, we've done it.
Yeah.
I mean,
we've
done it.
We've
do it all the
definitely
time.
done things like that. I think maybe they're learning tricks from us.
I
With this
wonder
one, though,
sometimes.
Part of what made it so cool is the way it was executed, because you walk down a hallway, you get to this illusion of a hallway that spans into the distance indefinitely. Then you turn around and you're like, hey, where'd that side passageway come from? And then it keeps happening over and over and over again as you go through the mission.
Yeah.
You have to go back and re-explore areas that you've been to before to see how they changed from you completing mission objectives.
I don't know if you guys have ever played the game The Stanley Parable. It's one of those indie games that you can like pick up on Steam for like $10. But it kind of does a lot of weird exploration of like being in a video game, and so sometimes you'll have like passages where you're walking around, and then you start realizing that you're just going in a circle, except that you never see you repeat your trail. So kind of fun stuff like that. It kind of reminded me of that. I also loved it when you're trying to open the door and you're pressing the button and it's like starting to things like polarize the polarizer or eject the fish or some weird stuff like that.
That was pretty funny, I have to say.
Yeah, some content designer was having fun.
Mm-hmm. Someone who had read.
Yeah, you're basically just making up technobabble as you go along.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but this was
doing
clearly
something
it's like some of
that's
the
not real.
goofy placeholder technobabble that somebody might put in before actually finding some real stuff.
And then forget to
only
put in the real stuff.
only intentionally put in there that way.
Yeah, this was very intentionally put there.
So let's see. One last thing before we move on from Delta Rising is looking at it from a Foundry author's perspective. How many awesome maps have they made that we would love to get our hands on? I mean, just the one we're sitting in right here, Kabali Prime. It's just awesome.
Yeah, this map rocks.
I've always kind of
Even the
wondered about a
backdrop
map
is
like
great.
this, or the new Romulus map, because this map is huge.
Oh yeah.
I mean, would it pose memory problems to try and load a map like this into the Foundry, or let alone to
That's a
say
good-
No idea.
That's a
the
good
time
question.
or the time it would take to prep it?
I mean, generally speaking, the barrier to getting maps put in the Foundry is the developer time to do it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's any other barriers to that. If this would affect performance of things.
Another one that I'd like to see is that Talaxian asteroid base. That
Yeah,
one was.
I really like that one. Tumor Boy is in the chat room. He says he think it could be an issue.
I mean, I don't imagine it would be an issue like just as a stock static map, but once you start adding in potentially 450 or 475 detail objects plus another 64 building objects, I mean, after that point, you're really starting to stack up the polygons.
He says the asteroid base is more doable, and that makes sense. But, you could do something like he's done with New Romulus, which is, take all of the objects that were used to make this map and give us those, like even the buildings there, and we can make our own version of Kobali Prime.
Yeah. At the very least, because, I mean, a lot of this, I guess with the exception of maybe the trees, a lot of this isn't something that it'd be too difficult to recreate on one of the stock maps. I mean, assuming you don't need the exact layout.
You can just make another part of the city, or another city on the other side of the planet or something. Tumor Boy says that he does have Foundry time in the schedule, but it looks like it may be needing to eat into that to finish Club 47, which I know a lot of people. It's important to a lot of people. That Club 47, not me personally, but I know it is to a lot of people.
As much as I do want Foundry time, I do also want Club 47, because I mean, that's been kind of one of those that have been hanging out there for a while.
Well,
it's true, it has.
For lack of a better way of putting it, ESD isn't complete without it.
Yeah,
that's true.
And really, I wouldn't want to have ESD in the Foundry until it had Club 47.
True, so wouldn't say no.
I'm going to turn it back into that self-serving for the Foundry thing.
We want Club 47 because it gets us that much closer.
Sure, that's a good excuse.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, I mean, I would really like to see the return of Club 47.
Yeah.
Which is super awesome to hear that it's you're going to be able to get some time in for that.
Well, now that the expansion's done, there's maybe a little bit more flexibility, and some things like that can finally get done.
And super exciting to hear that Foundry time on the schedule is a thing.
Well, at least his own personal schedule.
Well, I mean, usually each schedule is determined from higher up.
Sure. But he's saying he will definitely put ESD in once it's complete. And we thank you for that, Taco. Oh, and he does say it's official time on the schedule. That's awesome.
Then pass on my thanks to the producers for making it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, it makes us feel appreciated.
Our cupcakes were not in vain.
Of course, now this means we just need to get more. We need to send more.
Oh yeah,
cupcakes.
obviously, and pie. Because Tumor Boy wants pie.
Maybe we need to get the devs to start a list.
Yeah.
Check it.
What confectionery do you want this month? I'm not sure we could afford to do it monthly, but
Oh.
he says thank D'Angelo for adding actual official time to the Foundry, or for Foundry development time, which is completely awesome. So yes, we definitely will thank him for that. So let's see. Let's move on. So besides Delta Rising, have you guys been doing anything Foundry related?
Well, I've been. I tested part 2, did a test run through, make sure nothing had broken. The cool news seems to be that so far we have only seen one Foundry bug, and it's a minor asset thing with 2 of the generic Federation interior maps. But other than that, I mean, certainly nothing.
You're talking about the lighting?
Yeah, well,
yeah.
I'd seen this on Tribble 2, and it's a weird shadow on the 2 Federation interiors. I don't know what's causing it, but
Yeah.
I think it's something specific to that map. I don't know if one of the art assets has been affected and it's causing a shadow now or something like that. It could be a reverse to normal for all I know.
Yeah, I noticed that as well, and you can actually see it on some of those videos I made showing off the new assets.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, that's going to be kind of annoying for people who use that map, but in the grand scheme of things, it's
Yeah, it's not too bad.
far from the most serious Foundry bug we've ever had to deal with. But I'm really looking forward to getting into the editor, see whether or not the invisible map asset.
Primar says it's still going on Tribble, which I thought it hadn't been.
I see. I thought
for
it
a
wasn't
while.
there during Delta Rising.
Tumor Boy's not familiar with this shadow issue. It just seems like there's. Let me go find that thread.
Yeah,
Because Ashkrick posted it, and it's got. He has a screenshot. Now, it used to be uniform. Used to be uniform lighting here.
Yeah, and you go to one side of the room, and it's like there's a heavy shadow.
Here you go, Tumor Boy. That's the link there.
Oh, you were faster than me. So that's what we've noticed there so far.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I haven't been on Tribble since Delta Rising launched, but I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things that was gone for a while, and was here for a while, and I suspect it's kind of an intermittent build bug, but it probably means it's going to be a royal pain to track down.
Yeah.
And of course, right now they got a bunch of other more serious bugs they're worrying about.
Yeah. And we don't know what it's going to be like on holodeck until the editor gets turned back on.
Yeah.
Which we hope will be soon.
Well, hopefully, I mean, especially since we seem to have gotten through the republish without any major incidents. Hopefully, I don't think it'll be too much longer before we see the editor opened up.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you what I've been doing, which is doing some writing on that series of Hirogen missions that I've been working on. And I actually discovered a way to make them a little bit more accessible for people who don't have a ship and crew that they RP as Hirogen, which is it's going to be like told in flashbacks. So what you're going to do is you're going to be ordered to go talk to a Hirogen that's working with the Romulan Republic, and this is essentially, the story of how he came there and how he came to be working there. And it explains why you see Hirogen ships flying around fighting on the good guys' side instead of being their usual nomadic hunt everything self. So it's going to be told in flashbacks.
I've seen couple of... I'm sorry.
Yeah. And that was actually... will lead into a topic that I want to talk about later, but we'll get to that later.
Okay.
Why don't we do mission reviews? So I have 2 missions to review, and I'll find my notes for the previous one. Okay, but the first one, it's a mission that you all may be familiar with. It's called In the Shadow of Midas Part 2. And this won't be a terribly long review, because say it's a fantastic mission, and I of course had played it before. This time when you published it for real, and it's up for people to play, and I actually happened to have the honor to be play number 5 to get it out of review status. I will say my actual only complaint about this mission, I mean the story was good, the missions, the map builds were good. The characters were good. And I only had one actual complaint, which was that you had the gall to put Coming Soon Part 3.
Well, I didn't know how else to phrase that.
2017 then?
Yeah.
Pretty much sounds about right. Oh, I'm sure.
Because we know what your definition of soon is. It's about the same as a professional game developers.
It was, I think, Primar said I needed to put a TM after that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Maybe in the show notes I'll Sapience, another community manager from Lord of the Rings Online, who is now working for Child's Play, is he wrote what he called a brief history of time, which is, anytime a developer puts one of those coming soon buzzwords in there, he has various definitions for what that really means. So maybe I'll link that in the show notes.
Oh yeah, I'll include it. I know the one post you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very hilarious read.
People, he wrote it like 5-6 years ago, and people still link it today, especially me. So I mean, really, that was my only. It was just great, and some of your map builds just looked insanely complicated. Especially your good use of vertical space as well. Not everything was not on just one plane. You were going downstairs, you were going back upstairs. There was big, like, I don't know, what would you call that? A power core in the middle that
it was the central
could see
power
go
core.
up, and you could see go up and fade into the distance, and go down and fade into the distance. It was good stuff.
It was a royal pain to find a backdrop that had both fog and stars.
Yeah,
And enough lighting to
Imagine.
light the characters.
What backdrop was that? Do you remember?
It's been probably months since I looked at it.
Oh, fair enough.
The map itself has been built
the
for
only
quite a while.
the only thing I kind of would have liked to see, and I talked to you about this a bit before, was minor spoiler. There's a part in the mission where the enemy essentially takes over your captain, and you are playing as a being possessing your captain. And I would have liked to seen that go on a little bit longer and do even some more heinous, evil things as that entity.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of...
But it's a long mission to begin with, so I certainly understand why you didn't necessarily want to make that drag on too long.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to cause too much backlash because, I mean, I'm essentially usurping the player character's control. And I think at the time, it wasn't too long ago, we had someone on the forums like absolutely bashing Cryptic for mind games. And the fact that they were forced to do heinous things under mind control.
To be honest, though, I can't really... I mean, I can understand why people dislike it, but some of the posters took it to a ridiculous extent.
Oh, of course. But I mean...
I think they're a minority as well. I mean, I most of the time when a thread like that pops up, a lot more posts come in saying, "What are you talking about? That was a great mission."
But I mean, at the same time, I'm not actually looking to make Eidolon this absolutely horrible evil. I don't write them as a horrible evil. I mean, in a way, they're still kind of their own, doing things that make sense to them. And a slight spoiler, I actually kind of want to explore that a little bit further in part 3. And kind of give some insight into why they do what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Originally,
you definitely created an interesting race there, and
Yeah.
one that I will definitely like to see explored more.
I mean, in many ways, they're actually based off of an Enterprise episode, and I'm spacing on the episode, but basically, Enterprise is enveloped or like taken into this larger vessel that is occupied by these non-corporeal life forms that displace crew members and take their bodies. And that was another case of, yeah, they have motivations that are opposed to that of the crew, but they're not like doing it to like be evil. They're doing it to survive and save themselves. So, yeah, I mean, I didn't want to create another Borg, basically.
Sure. They seem a lot more driven by emotion than Borg. That's for sure.
Yeah. Which I'll tell you what,
It's always good to think out the motives of your villain, because if you just have your villain doing bad things to be bad, well, you kind of tend towards having a cardboard cutout of a villain.
A cartoon.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, writing the dialogue for your bridge officers when they're controlled was so much fun for me.
Oh, I bet.
Because I mean, I basically got to sit there and break every rule I've been telling people not to do. In fact, I think I should just change the name of this mission to Greendragoon breaks every rule he said you shouldn't do.
Yeah.
Well, I personally wouldn't phrase it as things you should never do, but things that you should be very careful about. Because, if you have a specific reason to write a bridge officer as an actual character, then, obviously, if that's what the story calls for, then that's what the story calls for. It's just that most stories won't call for it.
Well, I mean, the plus side in this situation is writing them in such an emotional way is basically, I can use it as a clear indicator that something is wrong with them, because they're not supposed to. They're supposed to sound like something is wrong. The player is supposed to feel like they don't have any control. So in a way, I'm kind of trying to bring out all of those emotions that normally we try to avoid as authors in the players. Anyway, I mean, one of the fun things about playing in the Foundry, and one of the things that makes it really interesting, is the chance to experiment and to see, there's this rule, but is it really hard and fast?
Most of them are not. That's for sure.
So it's also fun doing things like asking yourself a question like, if we had a Borg dreadnought fight an Undine dreadnought, which one would actually win?
Well,
they
canon,
they actually tried that as part of my testing a long time ago for making timer type things, and unsurprisingly, the Undine win.
Yeah, I think they're supposed to win.
I have a question for you, Dragoon.
Okay.
So your mission takes us to the Delta Quadrant, and did so. Obviously, part 1 did so long before we knew we were going there in the rest of the game, the official game. So in the Eidolon are a race that controls other humanoids, and you have a lot of them, those controlled humanoids, in the mission. Are you going to add in any of the new races that we'll be getting when the editor comes back up?
I don't know, maybe. I mean, I kind of threw in a couple of known races. I think there's a couple of Gamma Quadrant races that we could make with the editor, and I think I threw in a Hirogen, which is technically a Delta Quadrant race.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll make any too big attempts to go back and start adding them to part 2, but maybe I will mix things up a little bit in part 3. Because, I mean, literally you see the same set of 6 Eidolon over and over again.
Yeah.
Because I had 4 different enemy groups I had to custom build. Because I had the controlled Federation people, and the Free Federation people, and this particular crew, and that other crew, and then the ones on the station, which are not controlled Federation, but other people. And so I ended up with, I don't know exactly how close I am to the limit, but I can't be too far from it. So I had to be judicious.
All right. Well, I gave it a 5-star, and I recommend everybody go give it a try. Obviously, play part 1 first. Generally good advice. Hippie John says, specifically telling you, says not to tell you this. Obviously, you can see the chat. So, says, with the release of part 2, he has climbed to the top of the mountain fight with Alimac as favorite Foundry author. High praise.
Wow, that is actually really high praise.
Very high.
Alimac's missions. Alimac is my favorite author, and the one who kind of really convinced me to. I should say his missions convinced me to get into the Foundry. So, Alimac's missions was my ultimate strive. So, it is doing an Alimac mission to me is what becoming human is to Data.
All right. So my other mission that I played, this will be another a fairly short review, is called the Woes of Prisoner Escort Duty by Jamie Two Fingers 83. So what I feel like he's got here is kind of the skeleton of a good mission. it's got the very basics of, I think, what you need, and then what I think you really should do is flesh everything out more, because what this mission doesn't really have is characters. It's the plot is that you've got an assimilated Gorn prisoner that you've made a deal with the board to give him back, essentially, and you are the one who has to transport him. And the Romulans are trying to get your prisoner, so they're attacking you along the way. And really, that's all there is to it. It has only a little dialogue, and it has a few maps where you fight Romulans, and then you get to the board, and we won't go with there for spoilers. And really, that's it. And I think there's an opportunity here to flesh this mission out and make it a lot better by adding more characters, adding more dialogue, adding, going into detail about this prisoner. This prisoner could be a great person to talk to. Could be like a Hannibal Lecter in a cell kind of a thing, where you go visit him and he talks to you. But that's not something that you ever do. And I think to really have a good Foundry mission, I think you need characters beyond just your bridge officers. And there's some little things as well that were wrong with the mission. For one thing, one time you start in what is supposed to be your ship's interior, but you start the map in a dead-end corridor. That's an easy fix. You just stick one of the closed door assets, the wall with the closed door in it, at the end of that corridor. Problem solved. Another one is that he had custom NPCs placed on the map that were not renamed. So you had Captain, Federation Captain 01 or things like that. Place those down. That looks, it takes you out of the mission when things are like that. So you got to rename those NPCs as something, even if it's just getting rid of the 01 and it just says, Federation Lieutenant. That's easy enough. There was one objective where you had to go to repair something. You had to go find an isolinear chip. And my problem with this was it was lying on the floor in a room that you hadn't been to yet. It was lying in a random position. And yet your officer and your captain seemed to know right where it was. So I would add some objectives there where you actually have to go searching for it, go looking for it. Because there's no logical explanation for how you knew exactly where that was. And you can have your bridge officer say, I think I might know where that is, and let's check this series of lockers. I'm sure it's in there. Let's see. Another thing is when you place custom objects on a map, you want to test and make sure that they are not clipping into other objects, especially ones that are baked into the map, assuming that you don't want them to. So what I found a lot in this mission was crates and things clipping into other objects. So it looked like they were sticking out of them, or and just had things sticking into them, and it looked a little shoddy. And that's something that you want to take a look at anytime you place a custom map. Is this exactly where I want it? Is it spaced correctly with everything else? And he had some strange animations as well. He had one where you're supposed to be calibrating something that's on the ground, and he had a sitting animation when there was no chair there. So you sort of sat and your legs clipped into the ground. There's some different animations that I'm sure you could use. But overall, all the objectives were set up correctly. All of the combat was set up. I'll tell you one piece of advice: when you're in the plot of the mission, where people are supposed to be attacking you, instead of you attacking them, use a patrol. You set up a mob for a patrol to patrol to where the player should be, and then that'll look like they're attacking you. And if you have multiple mobs on a map, you can space them out or spawn them only when the first one has been defeated, so you don't overwhelm the player. So that would be my advice there. I think I only gave it a 3-star, if I recall correctly. It's been a few weeks since I played it. I tried to get a few plays in before the downtime started. So I don't think it's bad. I think it just needs more. But that is my advice for him. All right, Dragoon, you have a review for us. Dragoon, are you there?
Sorry, had my mute on. Yes, I also played a Foundry mission. I played Times Arena by Tonesis. Sorry, I'm going to butcher that name. Basically, the plot is you are sent to Vulcan on a routine maintenance mission. Once you arrive there, you find that a temporal vortex has opened up nearby. You are sent to investigate and sucked in, and find yourself in a completely unknown region of space that you can't identify. You search around and soon find out that you are not the only one there. In fact, another Federation starship has been sucked in from the TOS movie era, who actually has Admiral Nagura on board. And people remember Admiral Nagura was a character mentioned in the motion picture, but never actually shown. You end up conferring with his ship and discover that not only are you two not the only ones there, that there are in fact ships being pulled into this region from all over time, from the present all the way back to as early as early Earth warp trials. So you end up rounding up all of these people, anyone friendly. So there's a mixture of both people from the Federation and people from other races, Klingons and Erogen and whatnot. Some of them are hostile to you, some are friendly, and you try to get together as many as you can and find out that a Ferengi has been pulling out all of these races together to basically set up a arena to see who wins out and place bets. He's apparently gotten a hold of this ancient Takan generator and has been using it to basically pull everyone to extremely early in time before there were any spacefaring races to set up these matches. So you work together and you basically kind of come up with this plan to have the bulk of your of everyone kind of form a offensive to go after this Ferengi who has hired Hirogen to protect him. While your ship, happening to be the most advanced ship of the group, is sent around to ambush the Ferengi and try and stop him before he can escape or do any more harm. I don't want to say too much more about it without giving the ending. I'll actually talk a little bit about the ending at the end, but story-wise, the overarching plot is pretty solid. I like the general flow of things. I would say that it could be some of the dialogue and whatnot could be fleshed out a little bit more. I think, especially with you going around to figuring out what's going on. It would be nice if there was a few more twists and turns before you get to the it's this Ferengi doing it. But otherwise, plot was good. There isn't a ton of dialogue. It's pretty light, and that's not to say there is none. There is some dialogue. It's just not overly heavy with it. But I will say that the dialogue that the author did write was actually pretty good. He had quite a few different characters coming from various points in time, and he did a pretty good job of having the different or picking up on the mannerisms of these different characters and kind of playing it out. You get to meet a number of canon characters who were, as with Nagura mentioned, but not shown. So a lot of names you'll recognize, but not necessarily faces you would recognize. which he does. He executes quite well. Nowhere does it feel too strange that you're dealing with all of these people. I mean, it feels really well as that these were all people that happen to be pulled, not necessarily that the author is like forcing these particular interactions or going out of his way to like have this character or that character be there. Um, um, let's see. Visual-wise, most of his maps were pretty simple and straightforward. Obviously, most of this takes place in a region of space that is supposed to be unrecognizable, because it takes place before, basically before recorded time. And so it doesn't have to look too much. For the most part, he kind of just sticks with stock maps. I mean, nothing he uses is too bad, but it would have been nice to kind of see him dress things up a little bit more, especially with things like the bridge of. He has a bridge of a motion picture Constitution, and he just uses the basic veranda bridge that we all had, but obviously it looks a little bit more modern than the motion picture would have had it. Let's see. Gameplay-wise, it's fairly straightforward. He has a lot of you like flying around trying to achieve tasks. A couple of the tasks, especially on the bridge or the other ship's bridge, felt a little bit like busy work. It wasn't really having you do anything to advance the story, just kind of helping out. But for the most part, especially with the flying around trying to recruit allies, everything seemed to work pretty smoothly, and I didn't run into any particular problems, especially considering how vast a space I was often traveling across. It's one of those things that sometimes with space maps it could be easy to get lost. Combat was present, but not too difficult. All of the battles fit in reasonably well. He didn't have you fighting a dozen enemies or anything that felt just like to slow down the plot. Everything was, all the battles that happened were a product of the plot and integrated in smoothly. So I will say this feels kind of like a first attempt, especially with the simpler maps, but at the same time, I think this author has a lot of the good fundamentals down. And I think as he gets more familiar with the Foundry and feels more comfortable really with map building and stuff like that, I think he can develop into a great author. So the one thing I did want to talk about, and I kind of saved this for last, is and unfortunately I'm going to have to spoil a little bit to kind of talk about it, is at the end you get into a situation where you have cornered the Ferengi and he has set this time engine, or this time device that he has to explode, and you can't stop it. And just at the last minute, a Q shows up, basically complaining that this device has been mucking up the time continuum and giving her a really bad headache. And it ends up, this Q ends up being the solution to everything. And of course, as many people will probably recognize, this is basically a literal example of a Deus Ex Machina. And I think this kind of left me a little conflicted, because first off, I mean, the Deus Ex Machina, of course, is a very big trope and one that's kind of been looked down upon all the way back to like Greek playwriting.
Yeah, like 1000 BC or something like that.
So it's always considered kind of a storytelling cop-out. But at the same time, I kind of felt like, given what we know about the Q and the fact that they're kind of have this role of maintaining the universe and keeping things in check, it kind of seemed to work okay in this situation. So I kind of wanted to open that up as a discussion topic, is the Deus Ex Machina ever an appropriate storytelling mechanic?
I think it is. I've never been one to worry about that or look down on it when I see it in other fiction. And the example that I quoted to you, because you were asking this on Twitter a while back, is that, is from Tolkien, and everybody considers Tolkien a great writer. The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit are classics, and even though classics are not above criticism, but he uses it all over the place. In person of the Eagles. The Eagles always show up at really convenient times to save the day. They show up at the Battle of Five Armies to save the day. They show up at the end of, they show up to save Gandalf from Orthanc. They show up to save him from when he's lying dead half on the top of the mountain. They show up at the end of, they're all over the place, and they just show up at really convenient times to save the day. That is their entire purpose in his stories. And that's okay.
Yeah, because, with the Eagles, you actually have a reason for why they wouldn't, want to intervene on a regular basis. There's
because
really
they're
not
independent
that many of
creatures,
them.
and
if they get killed off, then, that's the end of them.
But, I have no particular problem with Deus Ex Machina myself because, and sometimes, as we all know in real life, sometimes convenient stuff just happens.
Yeah.
Well, one thought that I've often had with Deus Ex Machina is that whether it's a good thing or a bad thing is entirely dependent on what the story is and how it relates to the rest of the story. If you... It's horribly anticlimactic if your captain has to fight this enemy armada to prevent them from destroying the Earth, only to find out that the enemy armada... you fight the enemy armada, yada, yada, yada. Your ship gets horribly damaged, and then the commander of the enemy armada decides to save you, and then have everybody go home because you showed bravery or whatever in opposing him. It's a Deus Ex Machina, but it's the sort of thing that can be written into a story in a way that makes sense because, in this case, why are the aliens attacking the Earth in the first place? So if the reason for that is written into the nature of the Deus Ex Machina, then it's actually a good part of the story. But if it's just something that happens randomly out of left field, like, you fight the enemy armada, and then just when it appears that you're about to lose, a different armada shows up, blows them out of space, and then warps out, and this is one of those things where you're like, what the heck?
There's an example of a good one from Star Trek, which is, in Sacrifice of Angels, when Cisco and the Defiant have made it through the Dominion lines, they've gotten to DS9, the wormhole opens, they take down the minefield, the wormhole opens, and he goes in, and there's, the Dominion fleet in there, and then suddenly he entreats the Prophets to make them go away, rather than actually having to fight them. That's a little bit of a Deus Ex Machina, but it feels okay because, they've set up, throughout the series, they've been setting up his relationship with the Prophets. They tell him that there's going to be consequences from that decision, and that bears out through the rest of the series. And so it doesn't feel bad in that case.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this mission
Even though it's a bit of a cop-out.
It also fits
facing
with
that
the
fleet.
motivations of the Prophets because, the Prophets have a special reason for wanting to protect Bajor, and if they don't stop the Dominion fleet, then the Dominion fleet's going to bomb the heck out of Bajor.
Well, Cisco's showing a little bit of his manipulative side there, I think, as well. Because he's trying to convince them of that, even though, we don't necessarily know that's going to happen, at least not immediately. Certainly we can suspect that.
So, in this particular case, I kind of settled on the side of I think it works. While the Q obviously isn't introduced or even mentioned before this point in the mission itself, the excuse that is given when this female Q shows up is entirely consistent with what we know of the Q. The dialogue that he writes for is, I would say, almost about spot on what I would expect a Q to say. It's kind of that very flamboyant, that, ugh, what is it with you people? Why are you're giving me a headache? Like, enough of this. But I mean,
there's that danger with the Q that you can go overboard where it is simply a Deus Ex Machina and nothing else.
Yeah. Well, and then he does a little...
Also, with the Q, it's probably best if you write in a reason for why they actually show up in person and why they don't just snap their fingers from the other side of the galaxy.
Well, I mean, if they snap their fingers from the other side of the galaxy, then it would have been horribly confusing to the player, and that just would have been not right.
Obviously, but, you know, if the Q cares about your involvement in the situation that little, why would she show her face to you?
Yeah, I mean, she's not written off as completely uncaring as, say, John DeLance Q. We've kind of seen that while many of the Q can be flamboyant, they're not all as quite as nonchalant as John DeLance.
But see, that's the funny thing is I always thought that was a cover-up because he does actually care quite a bit.
Yeah. No, I thought that too.
Or at least he comes to after interacting with Picard for so long.
But yeah, she had kind of that
character development.
I'm slightly put out, and got to take care of this. Can't leave this like this. This has horrible problems with it, and actually, he has a scene at the very end where, like, all of the people you've met get like whisked away to Club 47 on the old ESD, and so you have a quick chance to like talk to everyone before the mission ends. So kind of that showmanship, and like I said, for the most part, I think because he writes the characters in a believable way, it works.
Well,
anyway.
advice for writers out there is that, you know, to do it effectively and to make sure it doesn't feel bad, is to try and set it up as much as you can throughout the episode.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, and I think maybe there were other things that he kind of did to kind of prep the player, because I mean, before that, there's a scene where the Ferengi has set up this force field and is going on about how there is no way that you can possibly get through this force field, and one of your bridge officer pipes up and was like, actually, Captain, I think we can just override it from this console right here. And the Ferengi's like, what? So he kind of set up some of those this humorous. It's not always complicated.
You can be sort of self-referential about it, you know.
Yeah.
That, and sort of poke fun a little bit at some of those things that Star Trek is known for.
And I think some stuff like that kind of helps to allow the player to let go a little of the seriousness and not expect everything to be, not overthink it. It kind of gives
I mean, in some Star Trek episodes, haven't they done some screwball things like hacking into the ship's navigational sensors through a replicator or something silly like that?
I'm sure they have.
Hey, we forgive the plot of Star Trek 4. I think it's kind of the same situation.
We forgive the plot of Star Trek 4 because it's just so funny.
Yeah, it's funny. Hey, it's all the characters.
I keep forgetting. Was it 4 or 5 that was the Save the Whales episode?
That's 4.
4.
I mean, yeah, if you think about it too much, the plot of 4 is absolutely ridiculous. But it works because all of the characters are just at their peak, and it's just so funny. I mean, basically,
good.
You don't.
The direction is good. You know, it's like, okay, yeah, you know, it's a bit silly, but we'll go with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like the humor allows you to kind of let go of it.
Like Scotty's comments deriding the technical abilities of the Klingons. I mean, even that was an ambiance thing to make it feel more alive, I guess you could say.
Yeah. I know, in a way, it's kind of, I think that's kind of how like shows like SG-1 managed to last, is like, we don't need to make it like super serious and absolutely perfectly
Oh yeah.
believable, especially if we like give the viewer some license to just kind of say, hey, just enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
Which I guess is kind of a lesson for Foundry authors in of itself.
Yeah. You don't always have to take yourself so seriously.
Humor makes your viewers less nitpicky.
Absolutely. So, I had a topic for you guys. I want to get some advice on this. So I told you earlier. Too bad.
Don't do it. It's a bad idea.
You haven't even heard what I'm going to say yet. So I told you earlier about these Hirogen missions being told in flashbacks. So what do you guys think about using a narrator? And how often should I use it throughout the episode? You know, and how should I format it? What do you guys think?
I've seen narrators used in a couple of places before, and I've generally prickled at them a little bit. And I think in retrospect, it's actually a lot about the way you use it. If you kind of establish early on that that this narrator is in fact a real person versus a disembodied voice, I think that would make it much more acceptable. A funny thing, when I was originally making up part one, I planned to actually have the whole thing happen as a flashback, so I could explain the cliffhangers. And so what I did was I planned to have it where you went through the wormhole, but then immediately like came back like you had just gotten back, and then you sit down with the admiral and explain what's happened. And then the mission would end with you back in the admiral's office and him saying, "Oh, we've got to take a break and we'll finish up later."
Well, I'll give you kind of the introduction of that I've been writing. So, obviously, because of lockboxes, everybody's noticed that you know, hey, there's Hirogen ships flying around on our side. Some of them seem to be even crewed by Hirogens. What's up with that? So Starfleet Command, or the Klingon High Command, I haven't decided yet, sends you to talk to a representative of the Hirogen that's working with the good guys, and he says, you know, to figure out why they're there and to kind of suss out if they're trustworthy or not, you know. And he says, okay, I'll tell you my story. And then you know, goes many years ago. And then you start off in the Delta Quadrant with this particular hunter. This, you know, he would be the narrator. He tells you how he became Alpha of his own ship and how they ended up in the Alpha Quadrant. And that's his whole series of missions. So he would be the narrator. And so the question is, you know, sort of how often should I, you know, just at the beginning and the end, or should I have him pop up throughout the mission telling you things? That's sort of the big question I'm facing, is how much to use him.
Well, I mean, assuming that this whole flashback is hypothetically taking place from the perspective of this Hirogen who's telling the story, I don't see why you couldn't just have him popping up talking all the time.
Well, you don't want to overuse it, right?
True. Maybe you have instances where your bridge officers interject in the story, like asking questions, and he clarifies.
That could be. You know, I could have him pop up and sort of explain different parts of Hirogen culture at appropriate times in the story.
Yeah.
Or explaining time jumps. You know, several months later, we found ourselves such and such.
Yeah, I think that's one of those unique situations where you could get away with a lot of things that would normally come across as normally make sense.
But you don't want to overdo it.
For one thing that you can do for certain types of narration is you could do something similar to the way Picard would often read his log entries out loud to do a setup for a specific scene in Star Trek The Next Generation.
So like a Heroian captain's log.
Something like that. But I mean, and Hippie brings up a good point: is that you want the player to lose himself in the story, and sometimes a narration can bring you back out of the story. You don't want it to really do that.
Yeah, but I mean, if you set up ahead of time what is going on, and that even though he is interjecting out of body, that this is in fact still in body because they're in fact being told this, not experiencing it.
So Primer is suggesting that you could have it be optional dialogue, activated by a reach marker, where you could stop and ask him questions, so that it's in the ops menu.
You could. I mean,
That's kind of a mechanic that you used in your puzzle a little bit.
yeah, I used it for that communicator thing.
Mm-hmm. How did you set it up so that it would be in the ops menu? Because I've never done this intentionally.
Honestly, it's a normal like map dialogue, but what happens is you trigger it initially, like with an interact, which I conveniently labeled ops.
Clever.
And so the first time, I think what I did is I set up a scenario where one of the part of your company wants to test the comm badges to make sure they're still working. So initially you have clicking the interact that says ops, and that pops up, and you have the option. All of the options that would eventually show up are all hidden, with just the one option that is responding to the one character that you're doing the comm test with. In which case she responds, "Okay, yep, they're working." And beyond that point, I just never let the dialogue complete. So you actually have to have a complete somewhere, or it'll throw up an error. But what you can do is hide basically the exit, so that the player can never actually get to the exit. And that's a good way to basically ensure that the dialogue never actually goes away.
Well, I mean, one good way to hide the exit is to do something like setting it so that the exit is only visible when you have completed all of the objectives on the map.
You don't even need that. I mean, it's not like you need to complete the dialogue in order for it to proceed. I mean, it'll just vanish with the map. So I just literally set the what I called it. It was an option that said system exit, and it literally just was set to be visible, set to never.
This sounds like a good thing that once the Foundry's back up, we can do. You can show us how to do it.
Yeah, I could probably do a topic.
A tech topic. Well, you guys definitely giving me some good things to think about. Well, let's see. We've got a few minutes left, so do you guys have any other topics? I've got one left that we could do, if you guys don't have anything.
Well, I did have that one thing to talk about. That
oh
picture.
Yeah, your weird email.
Yeah.
Throw that up on the screen here. Mark got a strange email, or several, in fact, over in
5
Champions
actually.
Online. 5 of them.
It wasn't
Yeah,
me.
for
I
some
swear.
reason, the male demon has been sending all of my Foundry messages to my Champions Online game mail instead of my Star Trek Online.
Which is a long-standing bug.
During the stuff for Delta Rising, it sent me 5 messages last week about how several of my missions had been withdrawn because they hadn't been updated in a month.
It was very odd. We've never really seen that before.
Yeah, I'm certain.
I know I've had missions that have been left for more than 30 days. And I've never gotten that message.
Well, could it be that it went without a play for 30 days?
It just says inactive, so I don't really know exactly what that means, but I can tell you that I hadn't actually been working on anything except my Fractal Nebula mission for that time. I mean, and you see here, you see this list that says movement testing, diplomacy in the Gamma Quadrant, treasure hunt with Teton, and you don't see Fractal Nebula there because Fractal Nebula wasn't one of the ones that I got a message about being withdrawn.
Oh, that's weird because I mean, know that I've gone more than 30 days, like for instance, working on part 1 or working on.
Well, here's the thing. My best guess is that this is something new that they added as part of expansion 2.
Did you not receive this message until after Delta Rising?
Well, look at the date. It has a date stamp on it.
Yeah.
October 14th.
The exact date of the start of the downtime. Primar is asking, these were missions that you had published, right?
Yes. I wouldn't necessarily call all of them finished, but they had been published prior to Delta Rising.
Okay, when you search for them now, do they come up?
No.
Okay. Interesting.
Then again, I'm not sure if any of my missions would come up simply because of the fact that I'm not sure. Let's see here. I'll look and see if I can find any missions by myself.
I'll see. That's a funny thing because I can think for sure that, for instance, Make Diplomacy Go is a mission I have not touched since we did the last live stream on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was more than a month, right?
I see 3 of my own missions.
Okay. Which ones?
I see Darkness Between the Stars, Bavat's Legacy, and Fractal Nebula.
So none of the ones I got.
Which are ones that you did not get emails on, right?
Yeah, if I remember right. Let's see here. Just double check. Because... yeah, see, because... actually, wait a second. Diplomacy in the Gamma Quadrant is one of the ones that I got a message about. But oh wait, yeah, that's the never mind. Yeah, so the 4 that you can see here are not ones that I can see when I look at the list in game.
Interesting.
I don't see any of them, and you know, I don't see anything that they. So yeah, Adwaita Incursion. I don't see it in the game, and I got a message saying that it was withdrawn. Movement testing, diplomacy in the Gamma Quadrant, and treasure hunt with Teton. I can't actually check diplomacy in the Gamma Quadrant because it's a Klingon mission, and I'm not logged in as a Klingon character.
I am.
But, you know.
I can check that for you.
I forget what the 5th one was. Oh, it was the other treasure hunt mission. Because I did treasure hunt with Teton and treasure hunt, which, despite having similar names, were radically different missions, and I think both of those got withdrawn.
No, I don't see diplomacy in the Gamma Quadrant on there.
So, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, this might be something new that they've implemented where, I don't know, if it's been inactive.
I don't know, I mean, it's strange because...
What inactive means, I don't know exactly.
Because, yeah, I mean, I haven't touched Make Diplomacy Go since June. So I don't know why that wouldn't be.
And I've got
inactive.
3 of my KDF missions that nobody ever plays, and I haven't ever worked on much since I published them that have not been republished.
Out of curiosity, Mark, how long ago would you say is the last time you worked on Diplomacy in the Gamma Quadrant?
Month and a half sounds about right.
Yeah, that's weird. I don't know.
Now, say we have been noticing this bug for a while, that emails that should go to the STO, your STO email from the Foundry, don't show up there. They show up in the other games.
Which, I mean, is one of those things
we
that it's
haven't
all
seen
one
this
mail
specific
server.
one before. Yeah.
But yeah, it seems like in recent months in the last year, they've been making attempts to try and separate them. so that Neverwinter mail doesn't show up in Stowe, or Stowe mail or Champions mail doesn't show up in Stowe. And it's one of those things that it, for some reason it's been excluding it from Stowe but showing in Champs. And
Well, since I've got 3 missions that haven't republished yet, I ought to log into my Champions and see if I got any mail over there. Which I haven't patched that thing in a while, if I even have it still installed.
Yeah, if you're going to do it that way, my recommendation would be to start the patch process right before you go to bed.
Yeah, and do it in the morning. So, and here's the other thing I think we should do is I think we should try and tweet some devs and see if we can get some answers on this.
yeah,
Because if this is a new thing, people need to know about it.
at the very least, send a post to or post it in the bug forum so Cryptocross can see it, and at least
Definitely.
then you can get us
Absolutely.
an answer, figure out what's going on with this.
Yeah, I did mention it on the forum, but, there was only one person who actually responded, and I'm not sure if people paid much attention to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll post it in the bug forums because that way.
Yeah. Then we'll maybe try and tweet some people and see if we can get that get it sorted out. But I think that will do it for us tonight, guys. We're at our time limit, so we will throw up our contact info.
All right. We can be reached at email at foundryroundtable@live.com. You're welcome to send us suggestions for mission reviews, suggested topics, suggestions for general improvements for the show. Want to complain about how we talk too much?
You
you're
talk
welcome
too much.
Want to complain about all those times that we let Relum on, how we should never do that again. We can also be reached on Twitter at Foundry Roundtab. Drogan can be reached at Drogan1701. Mark can be reached at Markhawkman. And I can be reached at Greendragoon.
And Realm Time, what's your Twitter handle?
At Realm Time 82.
Fantastic.
Is the 82 significant?
Yes.
Because our friend Realm here was a member of a unit with that number,
Ah,
That used to jump out of airplanes.
an illustrious unit. All right. Well, that'll do it for us tonight, guys. We will say goodnight.
good night.
Night.
Good night.